You are listening to TKK 89.5 North Star FM Radio, Tatak K, radyo kaalamang pang-modular. Magaan na sa buhay, madali pa sa pag-aaral.
Kumusta na kayo mga bata? Once again, you are tuned in to our science class on air. I am Teacher Mitch, and I am more than willing to give your most needed information in science. Let's move on, kids. Prepare your modules and ball pens. For the second lesson this quarter, we'll have the following competencies to discuss. Describes friction and identifies the factors affecting it. Can you recall the lesson that we discussed last time?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it is about a kind of force that pulls everything down, which is called gravity. Do you also remember that we talked about the factors affecting it?
Yes, ma'am.
Right, these are the mass and distance. This time around, we are going to talk about another kind of force. Yes, kids, apart from gravity, you need to know about this equally important force, and we call it friction. Friction is a kind of force that opposes motion, meaning if an object is moving forward, friction goes against its motion. Another description of the force is that it acts on objects that are in contact with each other. Well, if something is yet unclear, I'll give you some concrete examples on how friction acts on objects which are in motion. Have you experienced traveling on a sloppy road? If you will travel downward, the speed of the car will be very fast. Why? Because the motion of the car is affected by different factors, gravity and mechanical energy. But have you wondered why the movement of the car is controlled? It is because of friction. This force acts in an opposing motion as the surface of the wheels and the road produced friction. It goes against the downward movement of the car. But no, we are not yet finished. There is still more that you have to know about friction. Do you know that the amount of friction depends on two factors? First is the roughness of a surface. The amount of friction is greater on a rough surface than a smooth surface. Imagine that you are walking on a rough surface. Do you slip over? No, you don't. It is because friction on a rough surface opposes your forward motion. But why do you slip over on a smooth surface, especially if the surface is newly waxed? It is because a smooth surface has no friction. There is the absence of an opposing force into your motion, thereby causing you to slip over. Kaya po ingat tayo kapag walang friction. Another factor that affects friction is the force that pushes an object on a surface. Heavier objects have greater friction than the lighter ones. Heavier object pushed greatly on a surface than a lighter object. That's why, when we push or pull a heavy object, we find it so hard as compared to a not so heavy one. Moving on, let's talk about the different kinds of friction. First is the static friction. It is present in objects which are at rest. This kind of friction prevents objects from moving against a surface. One very good example of it is a book resting on a table. Static friction prevents the book from moving. That's why it remains on top of the table, unless otherwise someone removed it there. Another kind of friction is sliding friction. This kind of friction occurs when two objects rub against each other. A very simple example of it is when you push a table on the floor. The amount of friction that goes against the motion of the table depends on how rough the floor is. Another example of this kind of friction is when you comb your hair. Who among of you applies hair conditioner? What do you observe when you use it? Which is easier to comb? Of course, we are in unison when we say that the hair is easier to comb when we apply conditioner. Why? Because the hair becomes frictionless. Another kind of friction is the rolling friction. This kind of friction occurs when an object in motion is rolling on a surface. Concrete examples include cars, trucks, motorcycles, and the likes moving on the road. The last but not the least is the fluid friction. This kind of friction occurs when a solid object moves through a fluid. Example of this kind of friction is the push of the water on the swimmer's body. Another is on a ship or a boat floating in the water. But wait, we are not yet finished. Do you also know that friction has desirable and undesirable effects? Let's take note of some of its desirable effects. First, it allows us to grip things. Without friction, everything will slip out of our hands. Another thing is that it allows us to walk without slipping over. Imagine kung walang friction, bawat hakbang natin ay dudupilas tayo. Hindi lang yun, we will be able to run, swim, climb a tree, fly kites, ride on bikes and cars. Friction is also used to convert energy to heat, which is needed to produce fire. Remember a match? Kailangan siyang ikiskis para mag-apoy. Yan ay dahil sa friction. See? Friction is very important. Among the undesirable effects of friction are, it is difficult to move continuously kasi nga ay palaging may puwersang nakaharang. It produces noise which is, of course, annoying. It causes wear and tear of objects, especially in tires of cars and trucks. Now that friction and the factors that affects it is already clear to you, let us answer the following learning tasks. For learning task 1, you are going to tell whether the surfaces presented in numbers 1 to 5 causes more or less friction by writing more friction or less friction on the blank. For learning task 2, you will analyze the pictures presented. The first picture shows a ball on a smooth surface, while the second picture shows a ball on a rough surface. Then after analyzing, you will answer sets of questions provided. Congratulations! Our second lesson is done. Good luck to the next ones. This is Teacher Mitch saying goodbye for a while, and let's hear from each other next time.
You are listening to TKK 89.5 North Star FM Radio, Tatak K, Radyo Kaalamang Pang-Modular. Magaan na sa buhay, madali pa sa pag-aaral.
Sa North Star nyo!
North Star FM, Tatak K!